We are live. Welcome, everybody. This is the Rapid Diffs Architecture Blueprint Weekly, and we'll go straight to the agenda then. Patrick has some points. I can read it for him. He says that he's started listing down what we need to do from the backend perspective in work breakdown issue. Then he linked to the comment. Still a high-level one and depends on a lot of meta issues we're working on. If you have any thoughts, please feel free to chime in on that thread, and we can do this asynchronously. Any thoughts or questions on that? The only thing I added is that I think it's important to get to a consensual, more or less, breaking down of the work before we start creating issues in epics, because sometimes we change how we structure the work, and you're going to have to delete the epics or whatever, or rewrite them. It's going to be much more trouble or work to do later. So first, get to a sort of like consensual breakdown. Because I see that some of these work that he's broken down kind of spans back and front end. So whatever the group that's working on it decides it's the good breakdown, towards the end, start creating the epics and issues. That would probably be the best course of action there. Cool. I left a comment about that in the issues as well. Right. If nobody has any other comments there, definitely collaborate there. And Stanislav and Thomas, I think you two are assigned to that issue, right? So you both be working on that. Second point, also Patrick. He has a question regarding the streaming endpoint that we need to create based on current state things. I can't remember if we have discussed if we're going to have a single endpoint for MR diffs, commits, and compare pages. I know we can have the same responses, but the source of data can differ. Example, merge request diffs can get diffs from database, commit page will get diffs from Gitly. I'm also thinking this is dependent on the proof of concept testing that we still need to do, and then he linked to a comment where we're talking about probably adapting the POC that exists to also apply that same concept to commit repository commits. Is that it, Stanislav?
Yeah, I have a comment about that.
Cool. All right. And then I added a comment here in the agenda, and I think yes, I think the idea is to provide a single way to access diffs. So the endpoint itself, the API or whatever we decided to use, I think it should be unified for all usages. We might need to have some parameters, and I define like it could be a type of diff, but it could also be whether it's persisted or not. That could be the difference. But we'd like to abstract a little bit because right now we have these three use cases, but doesn't mean that we won't have more use cases in the future that we need to account for. So you want to be preparing for the future development of this feature. And +1 on prioritizing the rebasing plus POC in the repository commits page. Stanislav, you have a question?
Yeah, from the front-end perspective, it doesn't really matter if we have a single endpoint or separate endpoints. What matters is that we have a consistent output from these endpoints. So we get the same response from merge request, from compare commit page. If it's simpler for backend to have a single API, it's okay. If it's not, it doesn't bring any downsides to the front end, I think.
I mean, we can always get the endpoint passed from the backend, right? And then the backend decides which one to use at the certain point, as long as the output is the same. But yeah, I think for front end it doesn't make a difference, but I think for communicating this feature and for maintainability and all that stuff, I think it would be important. The one thing that I'm particularly aware is if we have different endpoints, we can start driving optimizations in one of the pipelines, but not the other. So if you have a unified one, we are a little bit more likely to keep that advanced in the same speed.
I think with Rails, it could be kind of hard to do because we do a lot of stuff. Like if you look at the controllers for the merge request, for the commits, they do lots of stuff. And if we have a single endpoint, I suppose you will have to basically do all of this in a single endpoint or introduce some like complex conditions. I don't know if it's possible in Rails, but definitely something we need to look for.
Igor, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that I agree with Stanislav that we need to distinguish between like different logics anyway. Yeah, for repository commits, for merge requests. Yeah, and we need to control it somehow anyway. Yeah, if it's not like different endpoints, then it will be like different set of parameters. Yeah. Because, for example, for merge request, we definitely want to specify merge request ID, like the commit IDs that we compare, they're not enough, yeah, because we want to activate some specific logic to merge request, yeah, to get the data from database. So we need to distinguish between like different behaviors anyway. So doing it in different endpoints makes more sense, but trying to unify the logic, trying to reuse the logic as much as possible, yeah, is definitely a good point.
Okay, thanks, Igor. Definitely good perspective. Okay, so let's go with, and Stanislav's point about the output being the same. I think it's the key aspect for us in the front end. So let's carry on with that then. Any other thoughts on this streaming endpoints? Any questions, concerns, anything we want to add? Cool. Moving on to the next point in the agenda. First, I wanted to start by thanking everyone who's contributed to the Dataflow docs. I think I've been looking at it sporadically, and it's shaping up really well, really nicely. I had some questions just from the verbiage used. I'm not really familiar with everything, and in particular, the one that I wanted to understand a bit better is when we're talking about diff storage. Where can the diffs be stored? How many places exist? I know about the external diffs that you talked recently, Igor. Could you give me sort of like a bit overview on how diffs can be stored? The diffs themselves.
As we discussed, yeah, it can be like external diffs that are stored in object storage database. Like for merge requests, yeah, for merge request diffs, it's either object storage that is enabled explicitly by
Sure.
config parameter. So, and database that we store the merge request, like diff files in the database, and also like Gitly storage. Yeah, and I mentioned in the comment that yeah, we can introduce some logic that is just a second. That is consistent with our like front-end implementation. Yeah, we could introduce some additional logic for the object storage. Yeah, that for example we pull files from Gitly, and then we pull all the other and then from the object storage. And so we could, for example, introduce something like this. And if the customers see that our new rapid diffs are faster anyway than the object storage, they can always like disable it and use the rapid diffs. If object storage external diffs still more performant for them, maybe faster, maybe from some other perspective, then they can enable it and use it, and we can iterate on it.
Got it. Thanks, Igor. That helps.
I have a question about GitLab.com. Do we use object storage there right now? Does anyone know?
I believe no. Otherwise, that feature would be more popular between like developers. I mean, we would know about it a bit more, but it's looks like some like rare feature. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think it's one of those things that might be specific to certain customers that really care about or have that in their infrastructure. But yeah, we need to at least account for that. Okay. Right. My next question.
The documentation, quick note, in the documentation, we mentioned that it's self-managed, like offering is self-managed.
Got it. Yep. And it's not optional, like you said. So it's opt-in, so they have to enable it. Okay, got it. Cool. So my next question goes into the caching of the templates, I guess. And it's more like, how should we handle the different ways of displaying diffs at the cache level? Users might be seeing diffs in parallel or inline view, and then have white space changes on or off. And maybe some other option that affects the markup level. I think it's important to distinguish the options that users might have to, customize their experience, but they don't affect the markup generation. Those that will, those that won't. For example, one that will not affect is the file by file mode, which I expect to be fully handled on the front end. So I wanted to understand a little bit better if you have any thoughts on how we should handle these different ways of rendering the diffs themselves. Yeah. And the last question, should we cache ahead all possible combinations of the diff? Go ahead, Stanislav.
Yeah, I have a backend question related to this. I don't know exactly how we store highlighted diffs. Is it just a single data point in a database, like a single record, or it's a separate record for each view? Do we have, do we render highlighting for each view that we have? That is actually important to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an answer right now, but yeah, as far as I remember, it's just, I believe the most popular option is stored, but or maybe I recall something that we actually store it based on the parameters, but I need to check it anyway. But we have some expiration date, which is not so large. At some point, we reduced the expiration period of the highlight cache and monitored whether it has any whether it had any impact on the hit miss ratio. And it didn't, so we have something like either 1 day or 1 hour, something I need to check. So but yeah, we definitely store it based on the parameters. If it's not used, then it expires. So something that we have now.
I just remembered that we have highlighted diff lines, stuff called like this. I think it means that we store old and new versions separately. And the views you see on the front end, this is a post-processing logic that happens on the Rails. Like we fetch both highlighted files, and we do some magic to remove white space or to make side-by-side views or inline views without using like pre-rendered stuff.
One note, Stanislav, though, that I want to distinguish, like the inline versus parallel, I guess, UI changes are all handled at the front end. At this point, the white space changes.
That means it can be done like a post-processing effect.
Yes. The question is, now that we're server-side rendering it, are we still able to do that on the front end? Because we're going to get the data rendered already, not the diff lines themselves statically. There is a part of me that kind of like thinks that it's possible with some Flexbox trickery and maybe CSS grid to kind of like just like repurpose the same markup into a different layout. But I think that in itself is a spike that we should schedule for the work breakdown, is how flexible can we have a template that just changes the CSS when we want to change these things? Because if that's the case, we would have a pretty instant updating of the UI when they want to switch, right? So I think that's going to probably be confusing at a certain point, but because of multiple reasons. But that's the thing. Since we're server-side rendering, I don't think it'll be possible to maintain the current system where we're just handling that on the front end so easily. It wasn't easy, but you know what I mean. Phil was there. He remembers the time where we were having two different calls for each mode, right? Stas?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to maybe find a way to do this just purely on a client side using CSS. But I think just to reduce the complexity overall, we can start with a simple version. When we trigger a different view, we just reload the diffs. And that doesn't necessarily mean we have to reload the whole page. We can reload just the diffs.
Sure.
We see how it performs. If it's slow, if it's not as fast as this used to be, yeah, we can maybe like figure this out.
Yeah. I know. Again, we want to prioritize the things users do the most often, and changing views is definitely something that you do sporadically, not all the time. We want it to be fast, but if that comes at a cost of like other stuff, we want to make sure that the usual path is much faster. Yeah, definitely want to be investigating this further once we pick up the front end issues. Question, Stanislav?
Yeah, we maybe even could add a feature to trigger a different compare view per file if you figure out how to do this on the front end purely.
Yeah, we can figure it out.
I don't know if that's a feature we want, but just an idea.
Sure. And your next question, Stanislav?
Yeah, if we go with template caching, I think there is just no other option but to cache each view separately. For example, if we like trigger white space changes, that usually means we are just removing lines completely. In theory, like white space changes can be handled purely on the client side, but that can introduce some like unexpected side effects. For example, if you have a file that consists just of a white space change and nothing else, you'll see nothing but a file header, and it will be kind of confusing. So yeah, so far for the template cache, I think it will be a different version for each view.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay. I think for now, I think we're okay, and then we'll proceed with the implementation soon, and then we can start figuring out what shortcuts we can take. Because part of me wants to like, if you want to cover all usage of a diff when you access it once, you don't have a lot of combinations. You have around like 4 combinations possible with the server side affecting options. But if we're having users having to have the same options combination, it just lowers the possibility for cache hit. But I guess we also have to factor in the cache storage, I guess, or the cache amount, the amount of bytes we're caching, so to speak. We're already one of the biggest offenders and one of the biggest users in terms of like merge request diffs and stuff. And we want to make sure that we don't introduce some availability issues or reliability. So we definitely want to do that carefully, but efficiently for our users. So that's going to be a fun journey of tweaking and testing. Cool. Okay. I think that for now I'm satisfied. I think I want to have to investigate a bit of the templates, how we're going to be doing that. But I think the overall consensus is that we'll be caching each view separately, and then we'll see how it performs. Cool. Okay. Any other points you want to discuss? I think I wanted to bring something up again. The POC for the repository commits. Stanislav, you mentioned that you were going to do the POC, you want to adapt the POC branch to have that. Do you think you need some collaboration from the source code folks to help you with that? whether back end or front end? Because you have two of them here. So
I might need some help from source code folks.
Which
I
one,
don't
back end
know.
or front end?
I think backend.
Okay.
Backend, because I'm not familiar with how they fetch the data, stuff like this.
So yeah, you have a thumbs up from Igor. Reach out to him whenever you can.
Thanks, Igor.
All right, that's it. Oh, I did just an FYI process wise. The source code backend manager Sean has moved on to a different team. And one of the announcements that I've shared today on the channel, I'm going to share it here as well, is that I will be stepping in as an acting EM for that team now. So for scheduling purposes, for SWA, like I will be handling the source code backend as well as the front end for both teams. So I think for this project, I think it's beneficial because it will give me oversight of both ends of the equation. So I think that's good. But yeah, just wanted everybody to know.
And we're going to expect the whole source code team to start working on Rapid Diffs then.
Oh yeah, you stole my joke as well.
Yeah, just a slight shift. Cool. Thanks, everybody. I don't have anything else. Unless anybody has anything else, we'll call it there. We're good? All right. Good to see you.